Welcome to the channel. Today you will hear an emotional fictional story about a soldier who went missing in action during a war that lasted for many years. Nearly half a century later, what was found in the ground left everyone who witnessed it speechless. Like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes as the mysteries are revealed layer by layer. In the early days of June 2025, a group of civil engineers was dispatched to a remote stretch of arid highlands to prepare for the expansion of a long-delayed infrastructure project. The region had once been the scene of heavy fighting, though the exact battle lines had long since eroded into the sand. Locals, if they ever passed through, whispered of ghosts of shadows that flickered just beyond sight and of strange metallic echoes on windless nights. The lead engineer, Dari Navid, was a pragmatic man. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses. At 31, he had built roads through mountains, deserts, and river valleys, and he had learned that the most terrifying thing was not folklore, but faulty foundations and ignored blueprints. Still, when he stepped out of the project jeep that morning, something about the wind felt off. They had reached what the military maps referred to only as Sector 46D. No towns, no ruins, just scorched earth and the broken spine of a forgotten hill. By mid-morning, the team had already started digging. The site was being prepped for a survey marker, a simple pole, one of hundreds that would later define the new route. It was routine, mindless work. But as Dari leaned down to brush a layer of dust from the ground, he heard a hollow clink. He paused. The sound didn't belong to rock or gravel. It was sharper metallic. He knelt and swept aside the dirt with his gloved hand. A few inches below the surface, something glinted in the harsh sun. He called to a young intern, Sahar, who brought over a brush. Together they carefully revealed what looked like the wooden stock of a long-buried weapon. "It's a rifle," Sahar whispered, more to herself than to him. Time had not been kind to the weapon. Its metal components were eaten with rust, the wood darkened with age and soil. But still, it was unmistakably a military rifle, and more than that, it bore markings. Dari turned the weapon, gently exposing a patch of engraved wood just below the rear sight. Monsieur Reza, 1982. There were murmurs among the crew. Some were curious, others disturbed. One older laborer took a step back, muttering a prayer beneath his breath. "Should we notify someone?" Sahar asked, glancing nervously at the hill that loomed above them. Dari didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the name, the year. He had studied the war in college mostly from a geopolitical lens, but the year 1982 stood out. That was the bloodiest phase. The time when entire units vanished in the desert, never to be recovered. "We logged the find," he said finally. "We record its GPS. We don't touch anything else until we know what we're dealing with." That night, Dari couldn't sleep. Back in the temporary camp, with the hum of generators and soft conversations drifting through thin walls, his thoughts circled back to the rifle. It wasn't just the weapon, it was the location. Why here? Why so shallow beneath the surface? Why had no one found it in 4 decades? He pulled out his tablet, searching for archived battlefield reports from the area. Many were still classified. Others had been digitized, poorly translated hastily. But one report from 1983 caught his attention. Unit Bravo 19 lost contact during operations near Hill 45. Last transmission referenced a sandstorm and encirclement. Bodies never recovered. Presumed KIA. Hill 45. Their current site was marked Sector 46D, but mapping was inconsistent back then. It could easily be the same place. The following morning, Dari made a quiet decision. He asked the dig team to extend their trench near the rifle site, not for construction, but for soil composition testing. 3 hours later, the shovel struck something else. Not rock, not more metal. Cloth. They stopped immediately. A larger excavation began, handled with greater care. Soon the full shape began to emerge. Fragments of a faded uniform, rotted leather boots, a belt buckle, and beneath all of it, a rectangular corroded tag still strung around a tattered collar. It was a military ID tag. The letters were barely legible, but with enough patience and water they could be deciphered. Reza Mehran, blood type B+, 1982. Dari stared at the tag for a long time. It was confirmation. A real name, a real man. Not a legend, not a ghost. But still, there was something wrong. There were no bones. No skull, no ribs, no femurs, nothing. The uniform lay flat in the soil, shaped like a man, but empty. "Where's the body?" someone asked aloud, breaking the silence. No one had an answer. The discovery quickly reached the ears of regional authorities. Within 48 hours, a military forensics team arrived at the site. They cordoned off the hill. The project was paused indefinitely. Dari was told to remain available for questioning. The investigators were professional, thorough. They collected the uniform, the rifle, and the ID tag. They scanned the area for remains. But their report was frustratingly inconclusive. No human remains found. Uniform degradation suggests prolonged exposure, but lacks evidence of decomposition associated with a body in situ. Rifle consistent with military issue. Engravings likely personal customization. The lead investigator, a pale, soft-spoken man in his 50s, pulled Dari aside. "Do you believe in hauntings, Mr. Navid?" he asked without irony. Dari blinked. "No." The man gave a small smile. "Then you should sleep well. Most people in your position don't." Later that week, Dari received a call from an unknown number. A woman's voice, quiet and trembling. "You found my son's name," she said. Dari sat down slowly. "Who is this?" "I'm his mother," she replied. Reza Mehran. He went missing in 1982. Dari didn't ask how she got his number. Something in her voice stopped him. "I knew he wasn't dead," she continued. "They told me he was lost, gone in the storm. But I knew. I felt it. A mother always knows. I'm sorry. We found his rifle, his uniform. But no body," she finished for him. "I know. I dreamed it years ago. The sand kept him, but not all of him." Dari swallowed hard. "Would you like to see the site?" "No," she said. "I've seen it enough in my dreams. But thank you for confirming. I needed to know someone still remembered." Then she hung up. He stared at the phone for a long time. That night, the wind on the hill howled like a voice trying to speak through grit and dust. And in his dreams, Dari saw a young man in a tattered uniform walking across the dunes, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes hollow and searching, still searching. 2 weeks had passed since the initial discovery on the hill, but Dari Navid hadn't been able to leave it behind, not mentally, not emotionally. His engineering team had moved on to other survey sectors as ordered, and the hill was now under complete control of a temporary military outpost. But every time he closed his eyes, he could still see that empty uniform, as if some invisible soul had slipped out the moment he blinked. It wasn't just the absence of a body, it was the feeling. A heaviness that clung to the ground, to the wind, to the memory of that quiet name carved into a forgotten rifle, Reza Mehran. The military report had classified the site as non-critical historical recovery. In essence, it meant they were not treating it as a war crime site, not as a modern grave, just a relic of the past. Dari disagreed. But he was no longer part of the conversation, until the second discovery changed everything. It happened 50 kilometers east of the original dig, in a completely separate section of land marked for utility trenching. A separate team of contractors not connected to Dari had broken ground on a slope near the edge of a dry ravine when one of the backhoes unearthed something that made the entire crew halt in silence. A box. A military-issue footlocker rusted and almost entirely collapsed inward, its metal edges shredded by time and pressure. But inside, miraculously, some contents had been preserved, protected by the dry soil and a layer of thick waxed cloth that had wrapped the interior. Inside the box were 5 items. A pocket watch stopped at 11:42, a crumpled letter handwritten in Persian, a green beret with no insignia, a pair of binoculars cracked on one lens, and a diary. The diary was what brought the military back in. It was thin, bound in leather, and clearly old. The pages inside had yellowed with age, but the ink remained mostly legible. It bore no name on the cover, no rank or title. just 2 words written in block letters on the first page. For her. The diary was taken secured and reportedly sent to military archives, but Dari, through a contact still on site, managed to obtain photographs of several entries. The entries began in March of 1982 and ended abruptly in August of that year, matching the exact timeline of Reza Mehran's reported disappearance. The tone of the early entries was clinical daily observations of temperature rations enemy movements. But by mid-April, the voice changed. It became personal, reflective, even poetic. One entry dated April 17th read, "We are 23 men now. The sand took 6 last night. Not in combat, just took them. Their tents were full of their gear, but empty, as if they walked out and melted into the desert. The wind covered everything. No tracks, just absence." Another on May 3rd. "I hear whispers at night. They sound like my brother, but he died in the first ambush, I'm sure of it. I buried him. So why does he keep calling my name in the wind?" And then June 11th, Reza watches the hill every evening, says he dreams of someone buried beneath it, someone waiting for him. I asked who. He said myself. That entry stopped Dari cold. If it was truly about Reza Mehran, then someone had been with him before his disappearance, someone who recorded the strange behavior, the dreams, the obsession with the hill. But who, and why had no one ever seen this diary until now? Dari printed every image his contact sent him and spread them across his kitchen table, treating the pages like puzzle pieces. His girlfriend, Nahid, watched him from the hallway one evening, worried but knowing better than to interrupt. "You're not a soldier," she said gently. "You're an engineer. This isn't your job." He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I think I'm the only one listening." That same week, a retired colonel named Arman Kazi reached out to him through an anonymous email. The message was brief. "You don't know what you've found. Stop digging, or I will come and stop it for you." Dari showed the email to Sahar, who had since returned to university, but remained emotionally invested in the discovery. "Do you think it's a threat?" she asked. "I think it's a warning," Dari said, "which means I'm close to something." He traced the email's metadata only to find that it had been routed through multiple VPNs and scrubbed servers. Someone had gone to great lengths to stay hidden, but one detail slipped through a geolocation tag embedded in a resized attachment. The tag placed the sender somewhere within 10 kilometers of the original hill site. Someone was watching. Unable to resist the pull, Dari returned to the hill under the guise of checking soil records. To his surprise, the military checkpoint had been removed. The outpost was gone. No guards, no tape, just open land and silence. He drove alone, parked, and walked the now familiar path up the rise. The wind had changed. It no longer howled. It whispered. He stood at the original dig site where Reza's rifle had been found. The trench had been covered, but Dari could still feel the gravity of the spot. He knelt, pressed his palm to the dirt. That's when he saw it. Something glinting just a few feet away, half buried near a clump of dry weeds. He crawled forward and brushed it gently. A button. Not ordinary. A military button, brass, inscribed with the faded emblem of an old disbanded unit. He knew the design. It had belonged to Battalion 51, a ghost unit, officially recorded as annihilated in 1983 after a friendly fire incident during a sandstorm. But the diary, if it was to be believed, suggested at least some members of that unit had survived for months after they were believed dead. He picked up the button, wiped it on his sleeve, and stood. And that's when he heard it. A whisper. "Dari." He spun around. No one, nothing but wind and emptiness. But he absolutely knew it had not come from his own mind. That night he didn't sleep. He didn't even try. He pulled up old archives, scanned troop deployments, cross-referenced missing in action lists. Reza Mehran's name appeared only once, but beside his name was a curious note. "See Red File 13X. He had no idea what that meant. But he intended to find out. And he wouldn't stop. Not until he knew why Reza's uniform was empty. Not until he learned what the hill was hiding. Not until he understood why the wind knew his name. The morning began like any other. The city buzzed with the dull rhythm of traffic and news reports, the air heavy with early summer heat. But for Dari Navid, the noise was background static. His mind was locked on two words: red file. After the whispers on the hill, after the diary, and especially after that brass button with the disbanded unit's insignia, there was no turning back. The past wasn't just resurfacing, it was pulling him in piece by piece, and he no longer wanted to resist. He'd grown up in a family that had survived war. His father never spoke about his service, not directly, but now Dari understood why. It wasn't always about blood or death. Sometimes it was the unanswered questions that lingered the longest. Red File 13X, an annotation beside Reza Miran's name. No link, no reference. Just a silent marker like a whisper written in ink. Dari knew that the military did not keep public records on red files. These were typically internal designations, classified datasets linked to psychological operations, covert units, or incidents considered too unstable to document through normal reports. He needed access to the Central Archival Repository, a gray facility outside the capital that kept thousands of boxes of declassified and restricted war-era documents. Officially, it wasn't open to civilians. But Dari had spent years working on government infrastructure projects. He knew people. One of them was Bahram, an old classmate turned low-level analyst for the archives. They hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years, but when Dari called and mentioned Red File 13X, there was a long pause on the other end. "You shouldn't know that name," Bahram said quietly. "I found it beside the name of a soldier who went missing in 1982, Dari replied. "He's not a name anymore. I've seen his rifle, his uniform. I've read the words written by the last man who may have seen him alive." Bahram didn't speak for almost 10 seconds. "Come tomorrow, 11 a.m. side entrance. Don't bring a phone." The next day, Dari followed instructions exactly. No phone, no laptop, just a notepad and a pen. The archives building was nondescript concrete and steel, designed to be forgotten by those who passed it. Bahram met him near the loading dock wearing a white shirt and blue ID lanyard, looking exactly like the type of man no one ever remembers. They walked through back corridors until they reached a small document room with no windows and 2 flickering overhead lights. Bahram didn't speak until the door closed behind them. "There's no official Red File 13X, he said. "At least not in our system. But there's an auxiliary vault of analog documents misfiled, unindexed. Old intel interrogation transcripts, battlefield records. Some were never digitized." He handed Dari a folder, thin, gray, marked only with a faded red X. "Where did you get this?" Dari asked. Bahram looked tired. "I've been sitting on it for years. I never understood why it was here. Until now." Inside the folder were 6 pages. A partial field report dated August 4, 1982, detailing a recon unit's failure to return from an overnight operation. A map with hand-drawn markings around a hill, unlabeled. A psychiatric evaluation of one Corporal Hamid Khorasani, who reportedly returned from the mission, incoherent, dehydrated, and raving about voices in the sand. A photo, blurry, grainy, showing 3 soldiers standing beside a shallow trench with a 4th man's silhouette visible inside the trench even though no excavation had occurred yet. A final page with handwritten notes: unit disbanded. No official casualties. All records transferred to Psychological Warfare Division. No further action authorized. The name Reza Miran was mentioned only once, scribbled in the margin with a question mark. "Who was Corporal Khorasani?" Dari asked. Bahram opened a drawer, pulled out a yellowing personnel file. "He's listed as KIA in 1984, he said. But there's no body, no burial record, no family claims." Dari stared at the file, then the map. "I want to find him." "You can't," Bahram said. "He's been missing for 40 years. So was Reza," Dari replied. That night, Dari took the photo home, the blurry one with the trench and the shadow. He scanned it into his computer, enhanced the contrast, then isolated the silhouette inside the trench. There was no question. The figure inside the trench wasn't standing. It was suspended, as if mid-air, as if caught between falling and floating. And though the photo was grainy, Dari could make out a patch on the sleeve. The same battalion symbol as the brass button he had found days ago. Battalion 51. He zoomed in further and saw something else. A watch on the man's wrist. Frozen at 11:42, the same time as the pocket watch found in the footlocker. Coincidence or ritual? The next morning, Dari received an envelope slipped under his apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph, new, color, sharp. It showed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench in a park. A caption written by hand. Khorasani, still alive. Ask him what happened to the other 22. Dari's hands shook. If it was true, if Khorasani hadn't died in 1984, then someone had been protecting a lie for 4 decades. And the question burned deeper than any before. What happened on the hill in 1982? And more importantly, what did they bring back? It was still dark when Dari Navid left his apartment envelope in hand. The photograph had haunted him through the night, the man on the bench, his posture, slouched gaze, distant as if he had been waiting not for someone, but something. He looked like a man who had been forgotten by time and preferred it that way. Hamid Khorasani, officially dead in 1984. Unofficially, alive and watching. The note had said, ask him what happened to the other 22. But even before meeting him, Dari had a feeling he already knew the answer. They had vanished, just like Reza. The address scribbled on the back of the envelope led to a quiet care facility on the edge of the city. It was unremarkable, an old building of faded bricks and dust-coated windows. No cameras, no guards, just a single nurse at the front desk reading a paperback. Hamid, she repeated, flipping a page. You're not family. No, Dari said. I'm a researcher. He served during the war. I believe he may have seen. She didn't wait for him to finish. She stood motioning for him to follow. Don't expect much. Some days he doesn't speak at all. They passed through a narrow hallway lined with wheeled walkers and faded photographs. The air smelled of antiseptic and dried flowers. The nurse stopped in front of room 107, knocked once, then opened the door. The man inside sat near the window, staring at a bird feeder hanging from a crooked branch outside. He wore a gray cardigan, his frame thin and stooped white stubble lining his jaw. But his eyes were still sharp, not young, not alert, but aware. He turned as Dari stepped in. I was wondering when they'd send someone, Hamid Khorasani said. Dari froze. You remember me? Hamid chuckled, a dry, broken sound. Never seen you before. But I remember that look. Same look the new lieutenant had before everything went to hell. Dari pulled out the photograph from the red file, grainy black and white, showing the shadow in the trench. I think this was you, he said. Hamid leaned forward, squinting. For a moment his hand trembled. I took that photo, he whispered. What followed was not an interrogation. It was a slow unraveling told in fragments, silences, and sudden flashes of memory that seemed to burn Hamid's tongue as he spoke. There were 23 of us, he began. Recon unit. We were stationed near the hill for a 5-day op. Nothing special. Just map updates, radio relays, and night rotations. But the third night, the desert changed. I know how that sounds. But it was like the whole place shifted under us. Compass readings went haywire. Radios died, and then men started seeing things. Voices in the wind, shapes moving along the ridge that vanished when we raised our rifles. At first we thought it was nerves. Then Reza started digging. Digging, Dari asked. Hamid nodded, his eyes clouding. He said he dreamed it. That something was under the hill, someone. Not an enemy, not a grave. Himself. We thought it was heat stroke. Told him to rest. He didn't. He dug until his fingers bled. Then he found the rifle. Dari's heart skipped. It was the same one you found, Hamid confirmed as if reading his thoughts. But it wasn't his rifle. It had his name. But we all saw him carve it in front of us, on something already there. That night, 6 men vanished. No gunfire, no signs of struggle, just gone. We found their gear, their boots, their voices sometimes in the wind, but no bodies. That's when I took the photo. I thought maybe I could prove we weren't going crazy, but what I caught... Hamid's hand trembled again. Dari helped him sip water before he continued. Reza kept digging. We tried to stop him. I tried. He looked at me and said, "I'm not supposed to be here yet," like he was waiting to arrive somewhere he'd already gone. Then the storm hit, the worst I've ever seen, sand like razors. We took shelter, but when it passed, he was gone. Hamid's voice cracked. His uniform was there, just like you found it. Neatly laid out, the tag, the boots, the rifle beside it, but no body. We radioed command, but no one answered. When help came 5 days later, they found only 3 of us left. The others? He looked at Dari. They called it psychosis. Claimed we killed each other, that we imagined it all. But I know what I saw. And I know what I heard the night before Reza disappeared. Dari leaned forward, barely breathing. What did you hear? Hamid looked him dead in the eyes. He was talking, but not in his voice. He said, "I remember the war. I remember my death. But this time, I'm staying longer." A chill ran down Dari's spine. What does that mean? Hamid's lips tightened. I don't know. But you're not done, are you? No. Then listen to me, engineer. The hill isn't a place. It's a threshold. Reza crossed it once. Then he came back. Dari frowned. Beck. Hamid nodded slowly. And if you keep digging, so will he. The nurse returned. Visiting hours were over. As Dari left, Hamid called out to him one last time. Check the locker under my bed. I kept something. Later that night, back at home, Dari opened the dusty metal box he had found beneath Hamid's bed. Inside was a cracked cassette tape. Label Reza, Night 82. And a note. Don't listen at night. Don't listen alone. The cassette tape sat on Dari Navid's kitchen table for 3 days. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't even been able to bring himself to look directly at it for more than a few seconds. Every time he passed, it wrapped in its cracked plastic casing, labeled in faded red ink, Reza. 1982. A strange unease fluttered through him, like the tension before a scream that never came. It wasn't just the note Hamid had left. Don't listen at night. Don't listen alone. It was something else. The kind of instinct that lives deep in the spine. Something primal. Something that says, if you open this, it will never be quiet again. But on the 4th night, Dari gave in. He didn't know why curiosity obsession, or maybe the simple fact that every time he closed his eyes, he saw that empty uniform lying in the sand. Or worse, he saw it standing, the face just out of frame. He pulled an old cassette player from a box in his storage closet. It had been untouched since university, dusty and slow, but still functional. He placed the tape into the deck with trembling fingers. Pressed play. The tape hissed. Then silence. More hiss. And then a breath. Soft, ragged human. Then a voice, male but wrong. Too low, too slow, too stretched. This is Reza Mehran. It wasn't a sentence. It was a declaration, as if the speaker wasn't sure what name to wear. Dari leaned closer. The voice continued. If you found this, I was right. The hill is not what they told us. It remembers. The next sound was harder to describe, like cloth dragging over stone, like dirt shifting beneath the skin of the earth. Then more words, louder now. We were not the first to dig. We uncovered something older, something waiting. A clicking sound followed, possibly the opening of a canteen or a radio dial being turned. Then another voice, female, faint, distant, speaking a language Dari didn't recognize. Then his own name, spoken clearly, directly. Dari Navid. The breath caught in his throat. He hit pause. There was no way. No way a voice from 1982, recorded 43 years ago, could know his name, his existence. He sat in silence for a full minute. Then, against every shred of logic screaming in his head, he hit play again. If he's hearing this, the male voice returned, now louder, more distorted. Then the cycle is turning. Again. He's standing where I stood, seeing what I saw. Tell him not to listen to the wind. Tell him not to stand on the hill at night. Tell him it remembers, and it wants him back. The tape hissed again. And then came the last sentence, soft, almost a whisper, and entirely in Dari's voice. I should never have gone back. Click. Silence. Dari sat frozen. The world around him, the apartment, the fridge, hummed the ticking wall clock, suddenly felt false, thin, as if he were a dream inside someone else's memory. He rewound the tape and played the final sentence again. I should never have gone back. It was him, not similar, not mimicked. It was his voice, his breath, his cadence. But he had never recorded that, had never spoken those words, not until now. He sat back, the chair creaking under him. Was it a warning, a future he hadn't lived yet? Or worse, a loop he was already trapped in? Later that night, he visited Sahar. He didn't tell her everything, only that he had something that might be linked to Reza's last days. When she heard the tape, she paled. That's not natural, she whispered. That's not just old audio. That's layered. There are two people speaking, sometimes in unison, sometimes not. Two, Dari asked. Sahar nodded, rewinding a section. Here, listen again. They played back the moment the voice said, "Tell him not to listen to the wind." Underneath the main voice was something else. A low, guttural sound, a shadow of the sentence, like another voice trying to say the same words but failing to form them. Dari's stomach turned. I think it's trying to mimic, Reza, Sahar said, but it doesn't fully understand him. Or maybe it's never spoken before. Later that night, unable to sleep, Dari drove. He didn't know where he was going until he arrived back at the hill. There was no checkpoint, no guards, not even military tape anymore, as if the site had been erased, not just ignored. He climbed the ridge slowly. The wind was quiet tonight, too quiet, as if holding its breath. At the summit, he looked down at the dig site. The trench had filled partially with sand, but its outline remained. He stood there alone, moonlight casting his shadow into the pit below. That's when he heard it. The click of a cassette. Behind him. He spun around. No one. But there, half buried in the dirt near a pile of stones, was another tape. Same label, same handwriting, but this one read, Dari, 2025. The second cassette sat in Dari Navid's palm like a curse, dusty, scratched. The same hand-labeled lettering, Dari 2025. He turned it over again and again as if expecting it to change, to offer a rational explanation. But there was none. He had never seen this tape before, had never recorded one, had never told anyone to label it with his name. And yet there it was, half buried at the summit of the hill as if it had been waiting. Or worse, left by himself. Back home, he stared at the cassette deck for hours. Sahar had begged him not to listen alone. She'd seen the first tape, heard the unnatural layering of voices, and knew something beyond logic had embedded itself in this story. But tonight, Dari needed solitude. He needed to hear it for himself, to know what version of himself had stood on that ridge before him. With a deep breath, he slid the cassette into the player, pressed play. Begin recording. There was static at first, then the sound of wind, a gust unmistakable matching the texture of wind that surrounded the hill. And then a voice. His voice. Identical. Same tone, same inflection, but something off, slower, measured, as if speaking across a great distance. If you're listening to this, then I didn't make it out. Or maybe I did. Once. It's difficult to know which version of me you are. But I need you to understand something. This is not a haunting. This is a recurrence. A memory the desert keeps replaying, using us as its needle. Dari blinked. He had never said these words. But the man speaking them had his breath, his soul. I've seen things I can't describe, not because there are no words, but because once you describe them, they remember you too. I thought it was just Reza, a lost soldier, a victim of war and heat and madness. But he wasn't lost. He was chosen. And now, so are we. The tape crackled. Dari leaned forward, breath caught in his throat. There are others, the voice continued. Versions of me, of you, of this moment, all playing out over and over. The hill doesn't take the dead. It takes the almost dead, the frayed, the ones standing too close to the edge of who they used to be. And it uses them to retell itself. The wind rose again in the recording this time, higher, sharper, like laughter hidden behind dunes. Then a second voice entered. Also his, but younger. Panicked. They're coming up the hill. I can see them in the sand. They're wearing my face. A brief scuffle. A breathless whisper. Don't go at night. Don't dig again. If you do, you'll find me. But it won't be the first time. Then silence. A final click. End recording. Derry sat frozen. Every cell in his body screamed, "This isn't possible." He reached for the tape again, examining every inch. Could it be some elaborate prank, an AI mimic, a manipulated loop? But who would go to such lengths? Why? No one else had been there. No one could have known. Unless there was another version of him, one who had stood on the same hill, made the same choices, dug into the same past, and recorded this warning for himself. Sahar arrived an hour later, unannounced, holding a thermos of black tea and a notebook. "I couldn't sleep," she said, "and you looked like someone who needed to not be alone." He said nothing, just handed her the tape, let it play. When it finished, her face had lost all color. This isn't a haunting," she whispered, echoing the tape. Derry nodded. "It's a loop." Sahar flipped open her notebook. "I've been tracing the diary entries, the ones we got from the footlocker," she said. "There are repetitions in phrasing. Reza talks about seeing himself digging before he actually started digging. Talks about the last storm before the first storm even happened." She looked up. It's like he was remembering ahead of himself. They stayed up till dawn. Theories flew like wildfire. Could the hill be a physical echo chamber? A metaphysical distortion zone? A psychic imprint of suffering? Or worse, was it a place where memory became topography, looping back every time someone tried to leave? Sahar wrote one line in her notebook and circled it. The hill remembers, but only through those who forget themselves. The next day, Dari returned to Hamid Khorasani's care center. Room 107 was empty. A nurse informed him the old man had passed away in his sleep sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. Time of death, 3:42 a.m. At that exact moment, Dari had been listening to the tape. They let him take Hamid's old notes and effects. There wasn't much, a few notebooks, a broken watch, and a sketch. The sketch showed the hill, but not as it was now. It showed 3 versions of the hill layered like geological strata. The top a present-day camp. The middle a military outpost, men in 1980s uniforms. The bottom figures in cloaks, standing in a circle holding torches. The sketch was labeled in block letters. All versions exist. Some overlap. In the corner a final message. He will dig again. So will you. 3 days passed after Hamid's death and Dari Navid hadn't left his apartment. He'd gone through every notebook, tape, and sketch a dozen times, tracing every word like a path back to sanity. But the line between reality and repetition had blurred. He couldn't tell if he was chasing answers or simply reenacting someone else's obsession, or his own, from a different loop. The final thing he found in Hamid's belongings wasn't a drawing or a letter. It was a mirror, a small scratched one, foldable, the kind soldiers once used to shave or flash signals. On the back, in Persian, "Check who's behind you even when you're alone." Dari stared into it. At first he saw only himself. Then he thought he saw someone blink before he did. He made his decision that night. He would go back to the hill. But this time he wouldn't go unprepared. He packed a field recorder, a magnetic field detector, a thermal camera, a journal, a compact mirror, and he brought both tapes, Reza, 1982, and Dari, 2025. He drove through darkness. No music, no radio, just the sound of his own breathing growing shallower with each kilometer closer to that cursed ridge of sand. When he arrived, the desert felt stiller than before. Not silent, just expectant, like a theater moments before the curtain rises. He climbed slowly, following his own previous footprints. Though oddly, some prints seemed older, faded, as if someone had walked this path decades ago in the exact same shoes. At the summit, he found the old trench partially reopened. That wasn't possible. He'd seen it filled. He stepped closer. There were fresh scrape marks on the dirt. Shovel lines. Someone had been digging, again. And that's when he saw it, standing across the trench. Himself. Same frame, same jacket, same field recorder strapped to the chest. But the man across from him didn't react. He simply stared blank-faced, like he had expected Dari. Or worse, like Dari was a ghost to him. "Who are you?" Dari whispered. The other didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head the way Dari did when puzzling out an equation. Then he smiled. Not a pleasant smile. Not hostile either. Just knowing, like someone watching a memory replay in front of them. Dari stepped forward slowly. "Are you me?" No reply. The other Dari reached into his coat, pulled out a cassette, held it up. Same handwriting, same label style. But this one read, Dari, 2026. Then without a word, the other version turned and walked down the far side of the hill. Dari tried to follow, but as he reached the trench's edge, a gust of wind blew so violently it nearly knocked him off balance. When the dust cleared, the other Dari was gone. He looked down. The cassette was still there, lying at his feet. He picked it up, heavier than the others, warmer. He slid it into the recorder and pressed play. Tape begins. His voice again, older, tired, slower. "If you've found this, then you've seen him. Or me. Or whatever version I was last time. You're further along the path now. You understand what the hill is doing, and that it's not just Reza or Hamid or us. It's the land. It's a wound. And every time someone digs, the hill remembers more." A pause. Then, "You asked if I'm real. I asked that too. But the truth is, we're not individuals anymore. We're iterations. You will leave this hill. You will try to go home. You will find that some of the streets you know are slightly off. Some faces are familiar but wrong. A smell, a sound just enough to make you question. That's how you'll know you didn't return to the same version you left." The tape hissed. Then one final sentence. "Eventually one of us has to stay behind. Decide now which one you are." Click. The recording ended. Dari was trembling. His breath caught in his chest like something alive was trying to crawl up through it. He looked around the hill. Everything felt familiar, but slightly wrong. The trench seemed deeper. The stars overhead had shifted slightly from what he remembered. The mirror in his hand, when he glanced into it, reflected not the desert behind him, but the door of his apartment. Just for a second. He ran, all the way back to the car, driving faster than he should have, ignoring the noise in his ears, ignoring the strange way the shadows followed him like echoes trying to catch up. When he reached his apartment, he paused. The number on his door wasn't 3C like it had been for years. It now read 3A. He unlocked it anyway. The key still worked. But inside, the furniture was different. The paintings he had put up were replaced with others. The air smelled of a cologne he didn't wear. And on the table waiting for him was another mirror. And a single note. "You came back wrong." Dari Navid stood in his apartment. His key had worked. His name was still on the lease, but the painting above the couch was wrong. It wasn't missing. It wasn't new. It was familiar, a photograph of the very hill he had just escaped from, taken from a slightly different angle in a season that had never happened. There were flowers in the photo, blooming yellow flowers circling the trench. In reality, that place had never known color. Over the next 3 days, Dari tried to make sense of what had happened. But the clues only deepened the wrongness. His neighbor, Mr. Naderi, no longer owned a dog. The coffee shop downstairs now played jazz instead of old Persian pop. Sahar's number was saved on his phone, but when he called, a stranger's voice answered saying no one by that name had ever owned that number. When he visited her building, the woman at the desk claimed no one named Sahar had ever lived there. And yet, on his fridge in his own handwriting was a note dated 2 weeks earlier. "Sahar, remember the trench. Don't listen to the wind after dark." His own words. A warning from himself. To someone who no longer existed here. Dari knew now he had returned to a different version of his reality. Not a dream, not a vision, but a slightly altered layer of existence, a shift along the edge of the loop, one where things looked the same, but weren't. He started walking the city like a stranger, observing, searching. People occasionally stared at him too long, sometimes smiled like they recognized him, then quickly looked away. The final sign came from the archive building. He visited it to try and find Bahram. The receptionist stared at him for a long time before saying, "Weren't you reported dead in 22? That he froze. "What did you say?" She blinked. "Nothing. I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else. But her voice had cracked. And her eyes that were wide with recognition. That night, a small envelope was slipped under his apartment door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, no name. I saw you on the hill. I remember that version of you. Come to the Northeast Park at 2:14 a.m. Don't bring the mirror. Don't bring the tape. Just come. The message was unsigned. But something in the wording, the phrasing felt familiar. Too familiar, like he had once written it himself. At exactly 2:14 a.m., Dari stepped into the park. Empty, cold, street lamps buzzing faintly in the mist. He waited 5 minutes. Then 10. And then, from the shadowed bench under a dying tree, a man stood. Tall, gaunt, in a long coat too heavy for the weather. He approached without hesitation. And Dari's breath caught in his throat. The man's face was older, weathered, eyes sunken. But it was his face. Himself. Aged at least 20 years. I was you, the older man said. His voice, gravelly like sand, had worn down the edges. Not from here, not from this version, but close enough. Dari couldn't speak. The man motioned for him to sit. He did. They sat in silence for a moment until the older Dari spoke again. You made it farther than I did. Found the 2026 tape. That's not nothing. But you're not finished. You're not even close. The hill never lets go after the third return. If you're hearing voices now, seeing faces in mirrors that shouldn't be there, it means the loop has recognized you. You're becoming a conductor. Dari shook his head. I don't understand. A conductor for what? The older man's smile was broken, sad. The past, the versions, the grief. The hill is a wound in time. And we are the thread the wound keeps pulling through itself. Every time one of us returns, the cycle continues. But every time one of us stays, the loop gets weaker. Then why are you here? Dari asked. If staying weakens it, why didn't you stay? The older Dari looked away. When I saw my own body at the bottom of the trench, still breathing, I ran. And I've been running inside this version ever since. A long silence passed. Then he placed something in Dari's hand. A map, drawn from memory. But this one was different. There was a second hill. A mirror hill east of the original, only visible at night, where the voices aren't echoes, but answers. Go there, the old man said, before you forget who you are completely. Dari stared at the map. When he looked up again, the man was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. Back home, Dari found the mirror he'd left behind on the shelf. In the reflection, the room was darker than it should have been. The door was open, though he remembered closing it. And standing just beyond that door was a man in his clothes, holding a new cassette, labeled Dari, 2042. The map the older Dari had given him was hand-drawn, rough, and filled with strange notations. One phrase was circled in red, scrawled like a warning. You will only find it when you stop looking for what you lost. He tried to make sense of that line for hours. Then he gave up. At 2:47 a.m., just before the first whisper of dawn, he packed his gear again. Only this time he left the tapes behind. He carried only his recorder, the old mirror, the field compass, and the map. The destination, a blank zone east of the original hill. A place that didn't exist on satellite imaging. As he drove, the roads became narrower. Familiar landmarks dissolved into pale shapes. Street signs appeared in slightly incorrect spellings. Trees stood where he remembered none. The world felt like an approximation of itself, real only when he wasn't staring directly at it. After 2 hours, the pavement gave way to sand, then stone, then nothing. The headlights caught a glint in the distance. He stopped the car and continued on foot. The air was still. Time felt suspended. When he crested the ridge, he saw it. A second hill, smaller, smoother, as if carved rather than formed. No trench. No flags. No military footprints. Just a flat surface at the top and a ring of shards surrounding it. Mirrors. Handheld, shattered, sun-bleached. They were planted in the ground like a broken crown. Some pointed outward. Others reflected only sky. And in the center of the ring, a voice. At first it was just a murmur. But as Dari stepped closer, it sharpened. Dari, can you hear me? He froze. It was Sahar. Her voice unmistakably, not distorted, not layered like the old tapes, not whispered through static or wind. It was her, calling. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said, "but I followed you. I always do. You left the mirror open." That's how I saw the second hill. His breath caught. "Sahar," he whispered aloud, unsure if she could hear him. Then he noticed one mirror larger than the others, reflecting not the night sky, but a room. A room he recognized. His own apartment. And in it Sahar, standing still, staring into a mirror. She looked directly at him through the reflection. "You're in the wrong version," she said. "I was too, for a while. But I remembered something. I remembered your voice saying, 'Don't listen to the wind after dark.' So I did the opposite. I listened. And it brought me here." Tears burned at Dari's eyes. "I thought you were gone," he said. "I thought I lost you." Her smile was sad. "You didn't. But you can't save me like this. You have to find the center. The place beneath both hills. That's where it started." The reflection flickered. Something moved behind her. Tall, thin, wearing a coat like his. He recognized the silhouette. Another Dari. But this one's face was blurred, literally blurred, like memory trying to forget itself. "He's coming," Sahar whispered. "Don't trust the next version of yourself. He remembers too much." The mirror shattered. Silence fell. The shards around the hill vibrated gently. Then one of them whispered. Not Sahar. Not Dari. Something else. A voice unfamiliar, ancient, hungry, soft as sand between the teeth. "Return to where the first name was spoken. Return to the hollow beneath." Dari turned to leaf, but froze, because standing at the edge of the mirror ring on the opposite side was another man. Not the older version, not the blurred one. This one looked his age. Same build. But he was smiling and holding something in his hand. A shovel. Looking for something, the man asked, tone casual like an old friend greeting him after years apart. Dari stepped back instinctively. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. "I'm what you'll be if you keep digging." He raised the shovel slightly like a gesture of invitation. "Come on. The trench isn't going to open itself." Dari didn't respond. He turned and walked away fast. Didn't run. He knew better now. Running never meant escape, it only repositioned the loop. Back at his car, he found something new on the windshield. A single mirror shard tied with red string, scratched into its surface. 2042, he lied. That night, back at his apartment, the mirror was missing from the shelf. He searched every drawer, closet, even the air vent. Gone. In its place, taped to the wall, a photo of the second hill, taken from above as if by drone or satellite. In the center of the mirror circle, a figure kneeling, face down, wearing his clothes, and beneath the photo a handwritten note. "Next time, bring the tape." Dari Navid returned to the hill one final time. Not the original, not the mirror hill, but the space between them, a shallow basin that looked unremarkable on the surface, yet hummed with something unnatural when you stepped too close. The compass spun violently in his hand. The mirror shard tied with red string vibrated in his pocket. The night sky above was too still, and the stars they no longer aligned like before. The ground beneath his boots felt hollow, not soft hollow, like the skin of something sleeping. He walked slowly, sweeping the recorder from side to side. Static surged the moment he passed the invisible border between the hills. And then a voice, not from the recorder, from the ground beneath him. "Why do you return, Dari Navid?" He froze. The voice was his own, spoken in a tone far too calm, far too certain. "You weren't meant to last this long." Suddenly the soil shifted. A crack opened in the earth no wider than a man's shoulders, no deeper than the width of a grave. From within, light pulsed, but not white light. It was amber, faint, like a memory trying to be seen again. He climbed down, not because he wanted to, but because he had always climbed down. Beneath the surface, the walls were carved with symbols, some resembling words, others faces. None of them were familiar, and yet he knew what they meant. He kept walking. The tunnel widened into a chamber, and in the middle of that chamber stood a table. On it 27 cassette tapes, each labeled Dari. Untitled, Dari. 1997, Dari. 2003, Dari. 2000, Dari. 2020, Dari. 2022, Dari. End. And behind the table, a mirror, the largest he had ever seen. In its surface, he did not see himself. He saw all of them. Dozens of versions of Dari, standing, sitting, some screaming, some silent, some older, some with scars he didn't recognize, others with tape decks in their hands. And at the center, one Dari kneeling, holding his head in both hands, whispering something over and over. I am not the original. I am not the original. The mirror trembled, and Dari began to remember. He remembered a child on a battlefield running through smoke. He remembered finding a uniform, putting it on, being mistaken for someone else. Heza. He remembered lying. He remembered surviving not because he was strong, but because the hill needed a survivor to tell the next version. And the hill had chosen him. Not because he was a soldier, but because he was a blank page. The voice returned. Do you see it now? There never was a Riza, not one man. Riza is a function. You wore the name once. So did the one before you. So will the next. Dari fell to his knees. His mind splintered with the realization he was never looking for Reza. He had been Reza in one version. He had recorded the first tape. He had written the note that warned, don't listen to the wind after dark. He had met himself on the ridge. He had become the old man in the park. And now, he was the only one left who remembered all the loops. The mirror rippled like water, and in its depth he saw the trench again. Empty, then not. Now filled with every version of him standing side by side. One stepped forward, held out his hand. Take the final tape, he said, and end it, or let it begin again. Dari reached for the tape marked Dari, end. It was heavier than the others. He pressed it to the recorder, paused, then looked at the mirror, at himself. What happens if I destroy this, he asked. The mirror smiled. Then we forget, and someone new finds the hill. But if you listen, then you remember everything. He pressed play. Tape begins. The voice was his, but clear, peaceful, unburdened. This is the end of the loop, or the start of the next. Whoever finds this, you are not the first. You will not be the last. You are not you. You are the story the hill tells itself to stay alive. A pause. Then, burn the tapes, break the mirrors, forget your name. That's the only way to become real again. Dari didn't speak. He stepped back from the table, from the mirror, from the echo of his own mind, and he made a choice. He opened the recorder, took the tape, snapped it in half, and as it cracked, the chamber shook. The mirrors shattered, the table collapsed, and the light above vanished. When he awoke, it was dawn. He was lying alone between the two hills. The trench was gone, the mirror hill gone. No tapes, no mirror, no symbols, just wind and sand, and silence. He reached into his pocket, found only one thing, a note, in his own handwriting, but with a sentence he never remembered writing. You were Reza, you were Dari, you were the loop. Now, be no one. Dari Navid walked into the city as the sun broke across the rooftops, but the streets felt colder, unfamiliar. Or maybe he had changed. He wore the same clothes, had the same face, but something inside him had cracked beyond repair, like the final tape he destroyed in the hill's hidden chamber. And yet, with every step, one thing became clearer. He remembered everything. He went to his apartment building first. No locks were changed. No notices. He climbed to the third floor, paused outside 3C, then stared. Because the nameplate on the door now read, Dari Navid. He knocked. The door opened, and a man stood there. Mid-30s. Dark hair. Similar height. Same eyes. But not him. Can I help you? The man asked, voice polite but guarded. Dari stared in silence. You're Dari, he said finally. The man smiled. Yes, and you are. Dari didn't answer. He looked inside. The layout was the same, but the paintings on the wall were different. So were the books, the furniture, but most of all the feeling. This place was his once. Now it felt like a stage someone else had stepped into, and the actor had memorized all his lines. Dari left without a word. Down the hallway, the concierge caught up with him. Everything all right, sir? Dari turned slowly. You know me? The man squinted. Sorry, don't think we've met. Are you looking for someone? No, Dari replied. I think I was just lost. The man smiled kindly. Happens. City's been changing fast lately. He gestured behind him. They installed facial recognition in the mailroom. If you're not logged, you can't collect packages. Dari tried not to show it, but inside something broke. He wasn't logged. He tried the archive next. The front desk receptionist, the one who had once mistaken him for a ghost, now didn't even blink when he walked in. He requested a file search on Dari Navid. She typed. Scanned, then smiled. Still active, she said. Mid-level clearance. Do you want to leave a message? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, tell him. He stopped himself. Tell him what? That he was the real Dari. That he remembered the trench beneath the earth, the looping tapes, the mirror hill. That the version now living his life was just a skin the loop had re-wrapped around itself. No one would believe him. He went to Sahar's building. It was gone. Demolished. In its place, a fenced-off lot with a construction banner that read, Future Site of Residential Towers, Opening 2026. He walked to the corner numb. A vendor selling tea stared at him. You all right, the old woman asked. Dari looked up. Her eyes were sharp, watching too closely. You look like you just woke from something deep. I think I did, he whispered. She handed him a cup free of charge. There's a rumor, she said, about a hill out in the east. His heart jolted. What rumor? She leaned in. They say the ground remembers faces, but sometimes it forgets to put them back where they belong. Then she winked, and when he looked down, the tea in his hand had gone cold. That night, Dari rented a room in a hostel by the river. No ID required. He stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror for an hour, tried saying his name out loud. Dari Navid. The words felt false. Detached. He opened his wallet. No ID, no cards, only a folded piece of paper. One line written in a rushed, looping scrawl. If someone else has your name, you were never meant to keep it. That same night, he followed a hunch. He returned to the building where he had once met the old version of himself, the man in the park who handed him the second map. The bench was empty, but taped beneath it was a cassette, unlabeled. No case, just raw tape worn and sticky at the edges. He hesitated, then played it. Tape begins. It was his voice, but distant, like from a room with padded walls. You tried to leave, didn't you? You thought breaking the loop meant ending it. But you were the loop. You weren't Dari Navid. You were the absence left behind when he disappeared in the war. A pause. The hill didn't choose you to remember. It chose you to hold memory, to carry it forward. And now that you've broken the story, someone had to fill it. So it wrote him, gave him your name, your keys, your smile, but not your burden. Click. Dari sat alone on the bench. The city around him pulsed on, unaware, unchanged. And yet in the alley across the street, someone stood watching him. A man. Not approaching. Just waiting, face hidden in shadow, but holding something in his hands. A cassette. Marked. Reza. 2025. Dari Navid stared at the man in the alley. The figure didn't move. Just stood with the cassette in hand. Reza. 2025, like a challenge or an invitation. That he crossed the street. The man was shrouded in shadow. Hood up, face partially obscured. But when he finally looked up, Dari staggered backward. It was his own face, but younger. Smoother. Eyes wide, almost innocent. You're him, Dari said. You're Reza. The man smiled faintly. No, he said. You are. He extended the tape. Dari took it. It was warm. Alive almost. When he pressed play, the voice that came through wasn't Dari's. It wasn't Reza's either. It was something older, deeper. A narrator, the voice of memory itself. Tape begins. During the war, many died without names. But some names remained floating in records, unfinished letters, ghost platoon lists. One of those names was Reza. He died on the hill, but his body was never found. What was found instead was a rifle, a uniform, a notebook, and a name with no face. Years later, a man returned with a recorder and a question, who was Reza? That question had weight. That question had grief. And so the hill answered not with a voice, but with a man. That man was you. Dari's hands trembled. You are the answer to the question. You are the memory the hill created to explain itself. You were never born. You were reconstructed. A mosaic of war stories, survivor guilt, missing persons, broken radios, and grief-struck families. That's why you remember things you never lived. That's why your face matches no file before 1990. Because your origin is not blood. It's absence. The tape ended. The man, the younger version, was gone. No footsteps, no sign of retreat. Just ash where he had stood. Dari collapsed onto the curb, hands pressed to his face, trying to feel something real, but all he could feel was heat. The hill, still alive, still watching. He wandered for hours after that. Through the library, the square where the statue once stood, the hospital where he thought he was born. No records, no trace, only whispers in the air. There he goes again, one more round. He doesn't know he's the tape now. In desperation, he returned to the mirror hill. It should have been gone. But that night under a full moon, it reappeared. Crisper, more defined. Like reality had reinstalled it. At the summit, there was only one item. A box. Inside a final mirror. Etched on the back, "Hold me during sunrise." He waited until morning, then lifted the mirror. And for the first time, he saw the original Dari Navid. The face was older. Rugged. Burned into Dari's memory from photos he had once believed were his. This was the real Dari, a communications officer who went missing during the war, whose last entry in his journal read, "I keep hearing a boy outside the trench, calling for Reza, but no one else hears him. I think the hill is trying to give me someone to protect." And then Dari understood. He had never existed before that sentence. That was his creation moment. Not birth. Not memory. Grief given shape. The hill had pulled together echoes of trauma, fear, loneliness, and woven them into a man to complete that dying soldier's wish. To protect, to carry on, to answer. That's why the tapes began with his voice. Why every mirror eventually showed his face. Because he was the feedback loop. Not the soldier. Not the survivor. Just the recording that couldn't stop playing. He looked into the mirror again. His reflection blinked back, but didn't match him. The eyes were sadder, older. Then the reflection spoke. "There's one more tape, but this one is yours to record." Dari stood, lifted the mirror, held it like a microphone, and began, "My name is, I don't know. I was never born. I was built. But I saw things, felt them, lost people who never existed, carried pain I didn't earn. And now I speak not because I want to be remembered, but so that someone else won't have to make me again. If you find this, stop digging. Let Reza rest. Let the hill forget." He placed the mirror back in the box, closed the lid, and as the first light of morning touched the sand, the hill vanished. This time for real. Summer 2025. A small farming town. Far from any hill, far from any war. A boy named Nima wandered behind his grandfather's barn, chasing a stray cat into the overgrown reeds. The grass was knee-high, the wind carried dust and pollen. Nima was 11, curious, restless. He didn't notice the half-buried metal box at first, but when he tripped over it, the thud caught his attention. It was rusty, heavy, stamped with no insignia, but covered in faint scratches, some resembling teeth marks. He pried it open with a rock. Inside, a broken compass, a cracked mirror shard, and a single cassette tape, unlabeled, old, black plastic, faded, but not damaged. He held it in his hand for a long moment. It felt like it had been waiting. Nima showed it to his grandfather. The old man squinted at it and went pale. He took it silently, walked to the back of the house, returned with an ancient cassette player. "It's probably junk," he muttered. "Left over from those military trucks they dumped after the ceasefire. But you can listen if you want." Nima nodded, slid the cassette into place, pressed play. Tape begins. Silence. Then a single voice. Clear, measured, worn thin by time. "My name doesn't matter anymore." I was a loop, a question, a recording. Once I thought I was a man. But I was only memory made solid. The boy leaned closer. His grandfather didn't move. Eyes locked on the floor, as if he'd heard this before. This message is not for the past, not even for the present. It's for the next one. The next boy who digs. The next voice that wonders who was Reza. Nima's hands trembled. He paused the tape. "Grandpa, who's Reza?" The old man didn't answer at first. Then he looked up slowly and said very carefully, "Reza was the boy I thought I saw on the battlefield, but no one else saw him. For years I thought it was guilt, delusion, but the face I saw, it was yours." Nima stared at him, confused. "What do you mean, mine?" The old man wiped a tear. "I buried that box in 1993. I didn't tell anyone. I just knew it didn't belong in this world." He picked up the mirror shard. It reflected nothing. No face, no sky, just static. Later that night, Nima snuck back out to the barn. Pressed play again. This time the message continued. "If you're hearing this, the hill has begun to redream. It will find a shape to wear. It will find you. But you don't have to follow. You can break the loop. Don't record, don't ask, don't name it. Forget Reza. Forget me. Let silence win." But Nima couldn't forget. For the next week he had dreams. Of sand and boots. Of mirrors in a circle. Of someone himself but older, standing alone on a hill under a violet sky. In every dream, someone whispered from below the ground, "Tell it again. Just once more. So we don't disappear." On the 8th day, Nima recorded his own voice over the tape. Just 6 words. "I don't know who Reza is." He played it back. But the audio was different. Not his voice. Not even Dari's. A new voice. Young, cold, precise. "Then let me show you." That night in his dreams, the trench opened again. And this time, something climbed out. The next night, Nima didn't sleep. He lay awake in bed, clutching the cracked mirror shard. The cassette was gone. He had left it beneath his bed when he went out for water, and when he returned, it was just gone. But somehow he still heard it. Not from speakers, not from tape, but from the walls, from inside the mirror, from the corners of his eyes. At 2:11 a.m., Nima stood in the doorway of the barn. There was no wind, but the grass was moving. It shifted rhythmically like something just beneath it was breathing. He walked, barefoot, silent, following no map. But with every step he knew he was going the right way. As if the path wasn't being followed, it was being remembered. The trees grew thinner, then disappeared. And suddenly there it was. A hill. Not large. Not unnatural. But it hadn't been there yesterday. And worse, Nima recognized it, even though he'd never seen it before. It matched the one from his dreams, from Dari's tapes, from the broken memory passed down like a curse. He climbed. The sand was warm. Halfway up, he saw objects sticking out of the ground. A rusted buckle. A shredded uniform button. A fragment of black plastic, maybe part of a cassette case. And a tooth, human, intact. He wanted to turn back, but his legs kept moving. At the summit, there was nothing. No flags, no mirrors. Just a flat space the size of a small room. And a voice, not loud, not even audible at first. It vibrated through his feet, then into his bones. "You brought it back. You carried the name. Now remember the first time you died." Nima's eyes watered. Not from fear, but because in that moment he felt grief he didn't understand. A weight that wasn't his, but that had been waiting for him to return. He sat, waited. The hill didn't move. The wind didn't return, but something behind him did. Footsteps, sand shifting. And when he turned, he saw a boy, same age, same hair, same face, exactly the same. But not him. The other boy held a recorder. Old, heavy. Its red light was blinking. "You're the new one," the boy said. "The loop made me too. In 2002, I lasted until I turned 13. Then they stopped seeing me. Then I became the hill." Nima's mouth went dry. "What do you mean, became the hill?" The boy pointed down. "Every memory they tried to bury, every person lost without closure, they fed it to the ground. And the ground built us. You think you're a kid, but you're the soil wearing a voice." Nima tried to step back, but the sand beneath him gripped his heels. The boy held up a second tape, labeled Nima, first copy, and smiled. "Don't worry, it always feels strange the first time." The recorder clicked, the tape began to play, and Nima heard his own birth, not as a child, but as a sentence. Boy about 11 saw something buried he wasn't meant to find. Imprint of Dari's loop, lineage unknown. Subject stabilized through memory adoption. Identity Nima, function re-entry. The recorder stopped. The copy of him, the other Nima, dropped the tape. "I'm sorry," he said, "but we can't both stay awake. Only one of us becomes real." Then he vanished. Sand swirled in his place, and Nima fell, backward, into the hill. He didn't hit the ground. He fell through memories. A battlefield. A girl's voice whispering Sahar. A trench full of mirrors. A recorder looping the word Reza over and over. A city that never remembered its ghosts. A voice his own saying, "Let me show you." He woke up in his bed, covered in dirt, hands clutched around a new cassette. On the label, Nima, rewrite, do not duplicate, and across the room taped to the mirror, a single note. "If you listen to this, the hill grows back." Nima sat alone on his bedroom floor. The cassette in his hand was labeled in red ink, Nima, rewrite, do not duplicate. It pulsed with warmth like a heartbeat trapped in plastic. The note on his mirror still fluttered with the fan. "If you listen to this, the hill grows back." He didn't understand all of it. He was only 11. But some part of him deeper than thought remembered. Not as images, but as pressure. As 1,000 invisible weights pressing behind his eyes. Every night since he found the box, he had dreamed the dreams of others. The dying soldier. The lonely trench. The broken mirror. The man named Dari who was never truly born. And now it was all waiting in him. Like a book no one had written yet, but he already knew the ending. He set the tape in the player, but didn't hit play. Instead, he walked to the window, stared out into the empty field behind the barn. At first, nothing. But slowly, as his eyes adjusted, he saw the shape. A subtle rise in the ground. A curve of earth that hadn't been there yesterday. The hill. It had grown again. Even without him playing the tape, even without him speaking the name. He turned to the mirror. His reflection watched him back. But something was wrong. The eyes were too still, too calm, not afraid. The reflection raised a hand, but Nima hadn't moved. Then the reflection whispered, "If you play it, you become it. If you break it, you were never real. Either way, you stop being you." Nima walked slowly to the player, picked up the cassette, held it in both hands. He thought of the voices, of Dari, of Reza, of the other Nima. He thought of the trench, of the sound of names being repeated into dirt, of the way the world kept creating people to carry pain that didn't belong to them. And he whispered, "What if no one carries it anymore? What if the pain just ends?" And with a calmness beyond his years, Nima did something no one else had dared. He snapped the cassette in half. Not in anger, but like closing a book, like turning off a light. A sharp click, then silence. The kind of silence that's not empty but clean. The mirror dimmed. The reflection faded. The hill outside began to dissolve. He stepped outside, watched as the shape in the field sank back into the earth, like it had never been. The grass stood upright again. The sky lost its strange tint, and for the first time in what felt like years, though it had only been days, Nima felt alone. But peacefully alone. No voices, no loops, no echoes. Just the wind and the morning. Later that week, his grandfather asked him, "What happened to that tape?" Nima smiled, shrugged. "Don't remember," he said. And strangely, he meant it. Whatever story had lived inside him, it was gone now. Like a dream that can't follow you into the day, and the weight that had never been his to carry was finally buried. But far away, in a different city, in a second-hand store basement, a stranger opened an unmarked box. Inside, an old tape recorder, a compass spinning wildly, and a blank cassette with a faint smear of red ink. They picked it up, held it to the light, and smiled. Wonder what's on this one. What if memories could rewrite people, and what if grief could plant hills? That was the story of The Forgotten Hill, a tale of loops, loss, and letting go. If you felt something from this story, hit the like, share with someone who needs silence more than answers, and subscribe for more haunting tales. What would you do if you found a tape that remembered you, but you didn't remember it? Let us know in the comments.